So welcome, Ali, to the Spark debate this evening.
Thank you very much.
Hope you've had a good day. Other people have had a long day. I expect you have too.
Yes, it's always a long day, but I love everything I'm doing. So what more can I say?
So have you been in school today?
Yes, I did an afternoon in school today. I belong to a little infant school, so I still get sticky every week. Lots of stuff with special needs this week. So yeah,
Okay.
A busy week from that point of view.
So we're here to discuss three things, I feel. I feel they're three separate things, as well as being drawn into the question, why is oracy and agency important in assessment in the early years? And I was guided by you very much about the title, Ali, because I don't think these terms are used very much in early years, as I said to you when we last spoke. So would you mind explaining them to people?
Yeah, absolutely. I was intrigued because I've been running a particular training, which I will tell you a little more about. And somebody who's very well known in early years came back to me and said, oh my goodness, oracy and agency in assessment all in one little tool. And it's like, gosh, I didn't know it was that grand. I thought it was quite a simple tool. But actually, when you unpick it, it does empower oracy and agency. And I'm frowning as I say that because, you know, if you've not heard the words, they sound terribly big and grand, but they're not. Oracy is about oral. It's about our mouth. It's about the way that children speak and the words that they're able to use. Having a voice is what I see as oracy, and having some of the skills and some of the scaffolding that we can put in place to help children to begin to have that oracy. We work with very little children, so we know that some of them will not have very many words at this point, but that's something that we can work with them. So that's oracy. And agency, I used to struggle with the word agency. I sort of used to steer clear of it until I linked it to the word agenda. And it's being able to speak about their own agenda. And oh my goodness, do little children do that?
That's really good, actually, that link. I think that's really good because I've put some notes down for this evening. And one of the things I've put down is about the child, you know, and including the assessment. Who do we do it for? But carry on. I mean, we all know what assessment is, I think, but it's all carried out in different ways, isn't it, at different times?
It's changed over the last couple of years. It's changed from having to have lots of tick boxes to actually being able to talk about our children. And the thing that's really important for me is that we can talk about the whole child, that it's holistic, because the child does not simply learn literacy, understanding of the world, physical development, all of the bits. They don't learn them in isolation.
No.
They learn them all together. And what's important to the child, we sometimes don't see if our assessment is just about tick boxes. As a SENCO, I often get given tick boxes to check for children, and they have a place. But actually, when we're looking at really understanding our children, our assessment needs to be more about insight. And this is where, when the three words for Ofsted came into play, intent, implementation, and impact. I think that's right, because I tweak it so often. It's making sure I've got that right.
Intent, right.
Implementation, and impact. How can we know what our intent is for that particular child if we don't have an insight? And that's where I began to develop this particular tool. I developed
it's intent, implementation, and impact.
That's right. Intent, implementation, and impact.
Yeah.
But the word that I believe comes first is insight. And I think that's missing. that's something that in the little school I work at, we have really focused on making sure we've got an insight into where our children are at. And so my whole school, all of the children are able to use this 5-finger tool, but it was also developed through the coaching approach with trainee teachers, and also working with children that I was tutoring as well, helping them to be able to reflect on what's important for them, what's going on for them.
And likewise with us at Spark, actually, although we have a learning journey within our software, it is actually very holistic. And although we recognise children's development, in a way it could be called a tick box in a way, but often there are things on the learning journey that practitioners perhaps wouldn't notice.
Yes.
If they weren't there.
Unless you flag it up.
Unless you flag it up. And the fact that it's there in front of them as a possible next step, or scaffolding the child's learning on what they already know and can do.
Yeah, no, I like that idea of the scaffolding, and it does it.
And that is the insight. It's in my mind, you know, using your terminology, and really knowing the children in depth.
Yes.
So, and it's not just learning about, it's not about knowing the child's development in depth, but it's about understanding the child, where the child's coming from as far as their cultural capital, I suppose, and also their interests. And
I call that context of the child.
Okay. It's interesting how we all use different language, isn't it, to describe different things.
Yeah. Looking at the context of the child, because that's the child in their home setting, the child within their siblings, the child within their peer group, and the child and how they settle within our setting as well. So that whole context of the child. And that's where the oracy and the agency come in. Because if we are open and we have tools that are going to help us reflect on that breadth, but then also to help the children to begin to reflect on that. And they will only begin in the early stages. But I've been blown away. I've now had the privilege of seeing this through with children who are now in year 2 and actually year 3. We had some that have gone on to a further school. And they have such confidence in their own agency and their own oracy. They're now able to use it independently, and they're beginning to take it into their home settings as well. It's just become a tool for life. The language of learning for life is what I've put on the book.
Agency, in my mind, is around a child having choices and being having autonomy within the learning environment. And I think in my experience of running nurseries and inspecting and doing quality assurance work and consultancy, often, particularly overseas, but I mean, it used to happen here. You know, everything has to be what the teacher wants.
Yes.
Or what the curriculum says.
Oh my goodness.
Or what the tick box, you know, we've got to do this morning, etc. Even in some primary schools, particularly when we had the literacy hour. Do we still have the literacy hour?
No, we don't have the literacy hour, but what we do have now is, but we do have prescription in pretty much every subject now, because with having to have deep dives into every subject, then people are feeling that if they have got an off-the-peg scheme that has been ratified, that if they follow that, then they will be ticking the boxes. And what that means is that there is less agency for the children and less agency for the teachers. I think there's going to be a turnaround from that in a few years' time. But at the moment, it's, forgive me, but in some, not in every setting, but in some settings, some schools, it can seem like teaching by numbers. The very best teachers.
It's doing to children. Well. It's doing to children rather than being with children, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And hopefully in early years that doesn't happen so much. Please, on the chat, tell me, what you see happening, or what you do in your, what you feel in your settings. Nobody is going to see the chat on, or who's saying what on the recording, by the way.
Yeah, it would be lovely to hear from you, and not just commenting on my menagerie. And in fact, actually, I'm going to put the cat outside the door just for a moment.
Okay, all right. I do have I've left my cats outside, but I do have a dog that might join the conversation at some point or another. I also think oracy. I mean, actually, I was listening to something today, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it was from an expert, a play therapist. And she said that only 7% of communication is spoken.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you heard that?
I know that a lot of it is in the body language, is in the eyes, is in somebody walks into a room, you can tell how they're feeling a lot of the time, especially if you know them well.
Little children, I think, are very good at picking up on that sort of thing too, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You were talking about things you've read. The East London Research School, which Julian Grenier is a big advocate of. In fact, I saw on my inbox, there's a new article about oracy and agency coming through from them. So they're really promoting it. But I'd be interested to hear from the people on our chat what they think that looks like in their setting at the moment, and maybe what questions that they have. So we've got Georgina, we've got Denise, we've got Martha.
We could talk about, I mean, in my nurseries, and there was a little bit on social media about this last week, I think. An Ofsted inspector criticised a setting because the children were not serving themselves at lunch.
Right.
And there was a big hoo-ha about it, that Ofsted's inspectors baggage, and they shouldn't be, it's up to the setting what they do, blah, blah, blah. And the person who put the comment on did say, we give the children lots of opportunity to make choices and, other times during the day, but didn't at lunchtime for whatever reasons. And in my settings, we gave the children a tiny piece of everything that was being served that day on a huge plate. And then they helped themselves to seconds, thirds, etc. And we actually were commended from that by Ofsted at the time. We'd always done it. It had always been that way. Just wondering what people do in their settings, the people that are watching. Perhaps that's something you could comment on. A lot of people have snack times now that are not necessarily sitting around a table, like a cafe style snack, a rolling snack where children decide when they want to have snack. I personally have never done that. We have snack in small groups. So we have different groups starting at different times, but with an adult around a table, and use it to talk. Absolutely. As talking time with an adult. But everybody's shy. So let's oh no, here we go. Self-serve snacks and meals for the 3+ children. Yeah, actually at set times. Well, for our younger children, we always had set time for snack, but as I said, it was done on a rolling basis. So I don't think in nurseries we should all sit down and do something at the same time. Some children take a bit longer to finish what they're doing before they're ready to participate in perhaps a routine activity.
Well, and if we're saying that children need to have oracy and agency, surely we as practitioners need to have that too. Because all of our settings are different.
Absolutely.
All of our contexts are different.
That's a really good point, actually. We shouldn't be clock watching. It's 10 o'clock, it's snack time. It should be a natural thing. I was going to make a point. I can't think what it was now. It'll come back to me.
When I'm observing, because I observe in my own school, and I have been training teachers for many, many years, teachers and early years practitioners. And one of the things that I really try to do when have the privilege of being in someone else's classroom and observing their practice is not to judge. I note down observations, questions, and suggestions. And at no point is it, oh, you were doing this, you shouldn't do it.
Mm.
How can I presume to know, unless, of course, there's, serious issues, in which case you talk to the practitioner separately. But, oh, I've never seen that done that way. I'm interested. I want to learn. I want to know why you're doing it that way.
And that's the intent part.
Yes, absolutely. But it does also link back to the insight part, because I want to know why is it that for this bunch of children you've chosen to do it this way, whereas last year you did it a different way, or for that bunch of children you did it a different way. So is it okay if I share just a little bit of the tool for?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Love to hear.
It's called Fingertips, because it is based on the 5 fingers of your hand, and there is an ebook on my website, www.alymcclure.co.uk.
That's okay. It'll be in the end.
That's great. And it's a reflective learners talking tool, empowering those helping our children to grow. So what it does is it empowers the practitioners, and then they can empower the children. So if you're looking at what you've set up for your children, let's say you've just revamped meal times or snack times, and I come in, maybe you've invited me to come in, maybe I'm your manager or I'm a peer, and then we use the tool. And I'm going to share a couple of the fingers with you today. The first one is the one that we like to start with. And the words are really important. What are you particularly proud of? Now, that is different to what went well. It's different to what are you good at? Or somebody had said you need to do it this way, therefore. And that can be, oh yes, well, that went well, so tick, done. Whereas, what are you particularly proud of? That makes people stop and think. I'm particularly proud of the dishes. Okay, tell me more. Why are you particularly proud of the dishes? And I'm going to use an example of practice that I've seen in a setting that I particularly enjoy. In one setting that I go to, they have got metal dishes, which are sustainable. It's a I'm trying to think how to describe it. It draws on the culture of the owners.
Okay.
And they come from an Indian culture.
Asian background.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of that culture in it, but it absolutely still promotes all of the British values that need to be promoted. But the bowls are metal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what that does is that the children can't break them. They can't damage them. They're not plastic, and they're not, not going to be sustainable. They're sustainable, and they feel to the children like what the adults have. And the shape of them is particular as well, and it works really well. I would never in a month of Sundays thought of having metal bowls. No. And I'm not talking the sort that you have when you're camping. They're really very nice, and they value the children. So what are you particularly proud? Well, I'm particularly proud that we broke the cycle. We've always had melamine plates or such and such a bowls, and we've always made the children sit up straight to eat or whatever it may be. But actually, we chose these bowls, and these are the reasons why we chose them. So I'm particularly proud of that, because I visited other settings. I looked at what other settings did, and coming back with these bowls has made such a difference. And then that gives us an opportunity to say, what difference has it made? And then they can go on and explain that these children are able to be independent. We no longer have to differentiate and have different bowls for different children with different needs. Nobody can break them, nobody can damage them, and everybody feels valued. And actually, when you look at the quality of things that we offer to our children, that can make a real difference. So that's particularly proud of. And then when you translate that into the children, they can begin, if you start modeling, oh, I'm particularly proud of, then they can start to say, take that from modeling and littlies, and they can say, I feel pride inside. Now, I've been developing this for a long time, and one of the feedbacks that I got was a child maybe doesn't understand what feeling pride inside. And you'll see I have a habit of taking it here every time, because that's what we do. And with the littlies, we say, I feel a smile inside, or I shine inside. So if a child has built a tower and you say, what makes you shine inside? Oh, I shine inside that I made it really tall, or I used the special blocks, or I did it with Daisy. It could be a social thing. It could be that child has struggled to do it with another child. And it's, oh, I did it with Daisy and it was really good, and we talked about it, and we built it ever so high. You can see I like it, I guess.
When there's so much negativity, particularly in early years, I'm going to talk from an early years perspective.
Yeah.
It's a long time since I've been in a primary school, but actually being proud, for adults to be proud of something, and that could be something really small, like a child put the plug in for the first time, or they didn't flood the bathroom.
Yeah.
Couldn't it? It could be something very, very small, of huge significance to that practitioner who knows that child really well.
Yeah. No, an example with tiny children, and one that I've used in conferences where I've spoken on this, is if you take a child who's crawled up a slope. So, you're talking of a child perhaps less than a year old even, who's managed to crawl up a slope. And then using this reflective learning tool, the practitioner uses the middle finger, and you'll be pleased to know it's this way and not any other. And this is about what was tricky. Either what was tricky and how did they tackle it. My children at school call it the longest journey, because we talk about how this finger, it's very difficult to do it with the screen, is the furthest away from you. So this is my longest journey. So what was the most difficult for you? What was the most difficult for that child as they were crawling up the slope? Well, you might just think, well, the child crawled up the slope. Brilliant. Tick the box. The child crawled up the slope. But if you always reflect on what was trickiest, you then start to observe the child in a little more depth and see, was there anything that child was finding tricky? And now the Senko in me comes out, because this child was climbing up the slope, but actually their right leg didn't come through.
Mm-hmm.
They were crawling, and this limb worked, this limb worked. We know about physical development. Speaking to Dr. Lara Manners only the other week, the left hip worked, but actually this right one didn't. And if I'd not been using this reflective tool, I wouldn't have noticed it. The child's agency is coming through. The child is demonstrating to us that they've got a problem with that movement at this time, and we may not have spotted it. And then it gives us the oracy to be able to share that with someone else. So what was tricky? Oh, actually, little Margot, they did climb to the top. But what was tricky was they didn't move that leg through. So I would really like us all to use our insight and notice. Does that happen when they're crawling on the floor? Does that happen at home? So it opens up a conversation with parents, and then everybody begins to notice that actually Margot doesn't use this right leg. I'm using my arm rather than sticking my leg up in the air. I won't leave you with that. Everybody begins to notice it. And then there's that oracy, there's that conversation between the practitioners about Margot's hip. Is it her hip? Is it her knee? I was going to say elbow. Is it her knee? What part is it?
For the child in that scenario, they might not even realise they're having difficulty in that respect.
The child won't, because they're tiny. This is just the way that it is.
Yeah, no, I realise that can't voice it.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking that they might not actually appreciate that they have a problem in that respect, which is quite interesting, I think.
It means we can spot things a lot earlier. And then, because it's really important with this finger, and this is, I'm very privileged, I'm going to be speaking on this at the World Forum for Early Years in a couple of weeks' time. We go on from not only what was tricky, well, the hip didn't work, but how did we tackle it? Or how are we going to tackle it?
Get the intervention.
Yeah. Yeah, and what are we going to put into our ordinarily available, that Senko jargon, you know, what have we got in place in our setting that means that we might be able to deal with this for other children as well, even if we haven't spotted it. So, okay, so this child is struggling with this. What can we do on an everyday basis to actually help this child? Well, there's something that happens several times every day with little children of that age. And it's something I know Ofsted are particularly keen that we use to good effect, and that's nappy time. So when this child is on their back, we have got them in an absolutely perfect position to be able to do sort of bicycling with their legs. And we'll be able to push against their legs to feel if it's got a similar pressure. And maybe that child will begin to push. If they're closer to a wall, they might begin to push against the wall. Again, another opportunity to have dialogue with parents. And what's that dialogue about? You know, have you spotted this? Do you do this with them? You know.
So when the question was posed tonight, I was thinking a bit more around the child's oracy. But we're actually talking about oracy and agency with everybody involved, and for Spark, I mean, our mission in life is to help everybody get it right. Everybody, you know, we can't do it. We can't get things right for the child if we can't get things right for the adults involved, and parents are a big thing for us.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Yeah,
and it's interesting that you've raised that, because the symposium that I'm chairing at the World Forum, we've had to put. There are 4 of us from around the world, and we've had to put our research together. And the title that we've come up with is When Adults Thrive, Children Thrive. So if the adults understand this oracy and agency, then they will be able to share that with the children. And let's take this with the children, because some of us have got really bright little 4-year-olds who are September born and are perfectly capable of reflecting on this. I could, you know, even name some names of little ones who were like, oh my goodness, you may look like you're 4, but you've got a brain the size of the planet. So you could say to them, what was tricky? You know, you and Jason were building tunnels and putting your cars through, or I noticed, or I wonder, but what was tricky? And the child might not have thought about it. They were saying, you say, oh, well done. You know, what did you do today? Oh, I made tunnels. Oh, well done. Full stop, tick, gone.
It's a little bit like high scope in a way.
Yeah, there are connections there.
Yeah, about reflecting on what's happened.
Yeah.
You know, the children have come together, and that's why I think a group snack time is fab.
Yeah.
You know, what have you been doing this morning? Okay, as an adult, I will have seen and interpreted and thought about what's going to happen later. But for the children to actually reflect.
If you were doing snack time, it's an absolute perfect time to reflect on the morning. What were you particularly proud of? Or what was tricky, and how did you tackle it? Well, it was tricky when I didn't get the scooter. Yeah? Absolutely. I wanted the scooter and I didn't get it.
It was tricky for me as an adult too, as they thought about them.
But what did you do? So rather than just hearing the child and obviously recognizing their feelings, facts, feelings, future. So that, you know, they say, I didn't get the scooter. So they're able to say what they found tricky. And then you can say, how did it make you feel? And that's really important that they've got that opportunity, so that then they get the oracy around their emotions and how that made them feel. and you could see from their body language. And then you say, well, how did you tackle it? Or, you know, what did you do? You're here. You're okay. So what did you do?
So also that's linked to the characteristics of effective learning, isn't it?
It's absolutely key. You look at those characteristics of effective learning, and would you not apply those to somebody who's applying for a job?
Oh, don't get me on that front. I have this thing about academia gets you into university and gets you on your college course and what have you. But when it actually comes to getting the job, it's the soft skills that people that you might get shortlisted because you've got the qualification. But actually, I take on the staff that are empathetic, team players, problem solvers, have a can-do attitude, you know, want to make a difference. I couldn't care less about the qualification, apart from the fact that I have to have them qualified, you know, to meet the regulations as such.
Yes,
sorry, that's one of my soapboxes, and that's a very quick,
but the
quick explanation of how I feel about that.
The subtitle of my ebook is The Language of Learning for Life, because if we empower children to be able to talk about their learning using these 5 tools, they will continue to do so. And we're seeing the proof of the pudding in that. Yeah, I'm gradually gathering evidence of your children writing when they're reflecting. These are older children, year 2 children reflecting on their topic. They're not told to do it this way, but they say, oh, well, the longest journey was, and this is what I did about it. What I'm particularly proud of is, and then you get to know what's important for them. So this is, you know, oracy and agency and assessment. Assessment can be the adult looking at the child, but it can also be an adult looking at an adult, or a child looking at a child, and it can be looking at yourself. Yeah, I use this as a self-reflection tool. I was, we both belong to a certain support group for people who are entrepreneurs, and I'd been on a meeting the other day. It's up to you if you choose to mention the name. I've been on a meeting.
Circle, folks.
There we go. She's plugging it. And I'd been on this meeting, and I had so much. I was overwhelmed. And what I did was I drew the 5 fingers of my hand, and I used my own tools to reflect on what I was particularly proud of. I'm not going to tell you them all. It's very tempting to do so. What was particularly tricky, and how did I tackle it? And then it goes on to give you strategies to use for the future as well. And I found myself using it. I also used it when I was teaching my son to drive, until he told me where to stick my fingertips on one particular occasion. I am not doing that again. But that's your teenage son with your mother who does this for a living. So
I mean, children having strategies, and I think all children have strategies. Some of them, unfortunately, are strategies they've had to devise to deal with adult expectations before they were developmentally ready. And that's another one of my soapboxes about, you know, how difficult it is to get rid of a bad habit as an adult, and yet we push children into having bad habits because they have to do things before they're ready.
I use a seesaw in my training, and on one side is developmentally appropriate practice, and that's what we're analysing here. What is developmentally appropriate practice? And we need to be confident that we know what it is. And this tool gives you the agency and the oracy to be able to do that. And that balances out with what's on the other hand is developmentally inappropriate expectations. And I'm going to say that again, bearing in mind that I do acronyms a lot. Developmentally inappropriate expectations. What it spells.
What does it spell? I'm not.
She's not writing it down. Developmentally, D. Inappropriate.
I.
Expectations.
Dicks. No, E. Sorry.
God. DIE.
DIE.
What's developmentally inappropriate expectations do to our children? They make them curl up and die inside. So it's not what I'm proud of. It's what made me feel really uncomfortable.
And for a child, that doesn't make them want to learn more, does it?
No, and then they don't speak out. They absolutely don't speak out. I find my children challenge my teaching much more because they're not afraid to say, Mrs. McClure, I found that tricky and I need your help to tackle it. And it may well reflect on I've over-explained it, under-explained it, gone too fast. You know, it comes back to us. It comes back to what we put in place. And what this can do is it can give you the tools to put into that context around the child. We curate the curriculum and we curate the context and our continuous provision.
So that's interesting because I use the word facilitate. I think we facilitate as an early years practitioner. My job is to facilitate around the child's interests and their learning needs.
But curate is about the equipment. So
I can include the environment in that. I would include the environment in that. That facilitation is about bringing things in that the child's going to be interested in. So they might not be interested in mark making, but if I bring something into the cars on the floor, then they perhaps will participate in the skills that I'm hoping that they're going to achieve next.
Yeah, absolutely. And facilitate comes from the word facile, which is easy, and it's our job to make it easier for them. So what we do makes it easier for them.
I was once accused in my nurseries. We had a better staff ratio. I've actually just sold my last nursery, which is a bit sad. But and I was accused by a teacher of spoiling the children because they had so much adult interactions, which was interesting, wasn't it? This was years ago.
And how did those children come out at the end of all of that adult?
Often too confident for the schools to cope with.
And maybe it was the teacher that was complaining.
We actually had one child that was moved from a school because the school said the child was too confident. So they moved them to another school. And I was very pleased about that. But but perhaps being confident learners was what I hope that every child, by facilitating what is appropriate for everybody, not just the child, because we have a lot of talk about well-being of staff and the fact we don't have enough staff at the minute, and attracting people to early years is really difficult at the moment. And so facilitating is a word that and enabling parents to participate on an equal part to a qualified educator who understands child development where parents don't. I think it's really, really important.
But yet again, this tool empowers us to share things with parents in a way that makes sense, and
in a positive way, by sounds of it.
Yeah, even the trickier that is, if there's a negative one, that's the negative one, but it isn't negative, because actually what it does is it shows people that we all find things tricky. And what I see when I'm working with children who are 4, 5, 6, who are now able to use this, that you get children who are taking their learning further. I hate the terms higher ability and lower ability. So I use those who are building the beginnings, those who are consolidating the connections, and those who are taking their learning further. So those who are taking their learning further, if we don't use these tools, never get to share what they found tricky. And nobody knows that they found something tricky, and they don't know the skills that they used to overcome them. And it's very empowering for children to see that somebody, and I had this with a little girl who was a fabulous runner, and the others were like, oh my goodness, she finds something tricky. And actually, she needs to practice in order to make that work. And that's like well, then there's hope for me.
Yes, I had a child that could do long multiplication in nursery, if you please.
Did they understand it?
Sorry?
Did they understand it?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't a child who had on the autistic spectrum either. He did actually get a scholarship to, but I had, but actually it challenged me. But I wouldn't have known what he found. Well, he wasn't very socially adept at all. But from his maths development, I wouldn't have known what he found difficult.
Yeah, and maybe he wouldn't unless he's given those tools.
Yeah, no, I'm sort of seeing this.
Yeah, and the thing that you were saying, that his social development was not so hot. There are 5 roots that are beneath this strategy, and the image on the book is very carefully designed. It is of a, have I got one here? Yes, I have. I've always got a prop to hand. Unfortunately, this is a spiky one, but the other one's a bit big. The image on the book cover is of a plant with a couple of little leaves that are coming up, and it's a hand nurturing it, not grabbing it and yelling it out, not squashing it, but just gently nurturing it. But also, it's what's beneath the surface, and it's not rocket science, but that's what I call the roots of learning. And one of those is what I call emotional equilibrium, and another one is social and self-esteem. So if what that child is finding tricky is the social, and very often those bright children do struggle like that because they don't have others that they can bounce off against in the same way. So he could say, yeah, actually, I wanted to do it myself. I didn't want them to help me. So I found that tricky. And then you could say, well, how did you tackle that? And he said, well, I put up with it, but I didn't really tackle it. So then that flags up that actually, well, I wonder what we could do together. Because if they say, well, I did this, but it didn't really work, not every child is going to have the solution to their own problem. And that then flags up to us what we can do to help. And maybe some little, we're not supposed to call it Lego therapy if we're not actually following the rules, but those sort of Lego games where there's a builder and there's an instructor, or
using their schema or schemes.
Oh, using their schemas is fabulous. Yeah, absolutely. And then building on their strength. But we can forget, because I also say you have to Maslow before you can bloom. And if you're familiar with what those are, the bloom talks about the higher level cognitive things that we would be judging. Tick, tick, tick. Can they, can they, can they? But beneath that are those social, emotional, those human factors that need to be in place. And we might not reflect on those. So I would encourage people, if they do look at the whole fingertips approach, to make sure that you look at those roots as well, because there's so much, as with every one of my strategies and the resources that I've developed as well, they look really simple, probably a bit like me. I'm a very simple person on the surface, but actually the depth to those simple strategies, I'm always passionate about.
That's really good. Ali, you always inspire me. You always come out with something that is very simple and easy to understand, and I applaud that immensely. But can we just move on to, because assessment for me is something that I think has got wrong connotations around it, particularly of late. Because assessment for me is something we're doing all the time.
Absolutely.
It's something that a good practitioner is doing all the time. And and doing and evaluating all the time. Because I can't see the point in doing an assessment and then not doing a formal assessment and then using it. All right. And in our software, everything builds on. We don't just do one thing, you know, it's actually used for a purpose and we build onto it, etc. But, you know, assessment, who, you know, why and what and for whom are we doing these assessments often? You know, even if we take the 2-year progress check, and you know, that really should involve parents and other professionals that are working with the child. And it should inform us, and it should enable us to do something much better for that child as a team of people around the child. For want of, we'll use that terminology that's often used for children with special educational needs, but for every child. I mean, before I set my nurseries up, I did a lot of work with children with special needs, and I've been a Senko as well. And every child in my nursery had special needs, as far as I was concerned, and I still work very much like that. It's just that some children have more needs or need more intervention than others.
Oh, absolutely. And this is you were saying what you do with your assessment. This is where my intent implementation impact, and I've talked about insight, but actually I use it as an image of an articulated lorry, so that we get to articulate our practice. And the insight, I like the way you've responded to that.
I just love the things you bring up. The way you describe things is wonderful. Carry on.
The insight is the beam, the headlight beam. So you're going along in the dark. If you're just going to do intent, implementation, and impact, well, you can do that till your heart's content. But if you don't have your insight, you don't have it. But then what follows in the wake? Because if we've done our intent, implementation, impact, and we've assessed it, then there's another im, and it's implications. And that's what's coming out of the exhaust pipe. Not nastily, but we need to pick up on those implications. Okay, so I have done an assessment on this child. I did one on a little girl the other day. I did a speech sounds assessment ready for the speech and language therapist. What are the implications of that? Well, it informed me. It informed me of some of the specifics of where she was struggling. And it also informed me that she had got a lot of things in place as well. So my implications, what am I going to do about that? What's the speech and language therapist going to do about that? And how are we as a team going to be supporting that child? So there's that insight and implications. The implications feed into the insight, and the cycle goes around again. I did have the nerve to share this with Ofsted when the intent, implementations, and impact. I spoke at the big Ofsted conversation on this. I didn't have the implications bit then, but I did share that the insight was missing.
We have a strap line: enable, evaluate, and enhance.
Oh, I like enhance.
Enhance, and that's what Spark's all about. And that again is a vicious circle, and can be linked to the 3 eyes. I'm going to be thinking
it's got
5 eyes in the future.
5, exactly. Yeah, when they get the message. I consider myself a catalyst.
However, it's not what we do. This is something else that's a bugbear of mine. It's not what Ofsted wants that we should be doing with our children. I mean, Ofsted are assessing part of what we do, I feel. It's what we should be doing as good practice.
Yeah, but that's why we need to be able to have the oracy and the agency to be able to talk about
communicate it.
And I want all of our practitioners. I do a thing where I'll go into settings and do talk the talk on your learning walk. And I will walk around with the manager or with anybody and say, oh, tell me about this. And they'll go, it's the sand tray. We always have the sand tray there. So, okay, tell me more. Tell me more. Why do you always have the sand tray there? Why is it at that height? Why is it near this? Why are those things in it? Which children come to it? So it's not, now let me get this
That's
right.
the facilitating part. I've also done a learning walk package if anybody's interested.
We can come together and have a great time.
But I think and this is where I think as practitioners we have to really think more deeply about what we do.
Absolutely.
And it is about this enable, evaluate, and enhance.
I love your enhance, and that's similar to I have the three questions that are often used when you're doing learning walks and what did I say? Articulating your practice. You see, that's why I have these visuals, because they help me to remember. I can see the lorry and I know it's an articulated one, so I can articulate my practice. We say why now, and then often we go on to what next. But for me, your enhance is missing. So it's why now, and not what next. It's what more. How can we broaden it? How can we pull it out? And that's why I've developed the products that I've developed, which are
I was going to say we need to mention, and I do apologise. I put an R in. Goodness knows why. I made a typo in the advert for tonight.
Yes, that's fine.
But it's not. I've taken it out of everything else.
No, it's fine.
So tell us about this, Ali. Please tell us about this.
Are teaching tools, kit that simply helps them grow, designed by those who really know. So at the moment, it's mostly products that are developed by me. It's a separate company. But also I will be curating things that I love from other providers as well. We've got a couple that are fabulous. And what the kit does, I've probably moved it out so that we're a little bit tidier for this evening. I'm going to go and grab a stick. Bear with me.
Please grab one of your sticks. I was totally intrigued by this. Does anybody have any comments? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you want to add something into the conversation? We're really quite happy. We're getting carried away here, but we're very happy to be guided by what you'd like to talk about as well. Carry on, Ali. Got one of your sticks.
That's fine. Yes, it's the why now, what more rather than what next. And I've always used lots of one item. So maybe lots of tins or lots of square cloths or lots of things that you've got around. And I was using lots of broomsticks. And then when I was using two together, then they would seesaw. So first off, I got my brother to put a groove in. And they have developed into, this is called a Groovy broomstick. It's not rocket science, is it? But it's then how else can you use them? And we started off by doing a crisscross with them. It's easier to show you with pencils on a screen. We started off by doing a crisscross. And if you can see, my two pencils would rock against each other. So there's the groove in there. And then it became apparent that actually you could make a really nice grid. So then we put the grooves in at the end. And then some children were talking about, oh, well, what's longer than my stick? What's shorter than my stick? And then it was, well, how long is your stick? Are we patronising children by not introducing them in an appropriate way to standard measure? So then we put in these grooves here. And it's sensory, so that if you are visually impaired, you can still do it. That's 50 centimetres, and it's impossible to get it all. Oh, maybe not. Oh, I've got a whole stick in. There's a first. I've got Ottilie in the background. She's my school dog, by the way. So that's a metre that I'm touching there. So children can begin to measure things against this when you make a grid out of it that are less than a metre. And then what more? Well, I ended up sticking them into, I now stick them in rounders bases, but we were sticking them into baby milk tins with pebbles in, and we were resting things on the top. But then we wanted to make a washing line, and this works quite well. But if you want to make a really good washing line, they've now got holes in the top, which also means that you can put hair bobbles through and you can make a teepee. You can also make a teepee by putting them in the fingers of gloves, which is quite fun. So they are just multi-purpose. And a good girlfriend of mine she challenged my choices. She gave me some feedback because we're very, very new in this, very new in it. And she said, I looked at your website and I don't get your sticks. There's just some pictures of sticks. I need to know what to do with them. So I do need to put in some ideas of what to do with them. And they are there, actually, if you look. But the thing is that they are open-ended. And I can tell you every time I use these with children, they do different things with them. And they interlock, you know, you can have 18 together and they interlock and make a grid in your outdoor area. Or you certainly the sorting things, doing classification is one of the most popular. If you put, you're challenging me now.
Your pencils.
3 pencils that way. I need more hands, Kathy.
Yeah, okay.
3 pencils that way and 2 that way. Mm-hmm. It makes 2 sort of columns, and sorting things into those columns, things that are straight and not straight. Now that very simple exercise gets children talking. Well, is that straight or is that not straight? Well, that's knobbly.
In early years, I think we tend to put things in circles when we do classification. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing with this is they can overlap. And I had a little boy, he was doing red and not red. I went to his house and did that with him, which was it was interesting because his mum's a doctor of maths. So he was a very bright little button. And his 2-year-old brother got involved and was using the equipment in ways I would never have expected a 2-year-old to be able to engage with it. And it's like, oh my goodness, they can do this. So he was doing red and not red. I do need more hands. So if you imagine that this is a grid and we've got red in here and not red, and of course these are all the same colour so it doesn't confuse. He was sorting all sorts of things into red and not red, and his little brother got it and started putting red things in the red side. But this 4-year-old went and got his pyjamas, and his pyjamas were blue, but they had a red cuff on. So what did he do?
He laid them across.
You laid them across. And then you say, oh, tell me about it. Why did you do that? He said, well, that's red. That's not red. Another little girl.
Now you see, that would be something I would be really proud of.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I am. And what this tool has done for me, I prefer to be a humble person. I believe that these ideas have evolved over the years thanks to the opportunities that I've had. And I sometimes wake up in the morning and there's another one in there. I don't know where it gets posted in, but it somehow does. But I've actually seen these through to fulfillment. You know, they are now real products on the bitskit.info website.
Yeah, and that's coming. That will be in the
good. I'm glad to hear it.
So
and I can say to people, I hope you don't mind me sharing, but I am actually particularly proud of these. They have come from ideas over the years, and Bitskit was 2018 was when the first idea of it came about, and we launched on the 3rd of February this year.
And it's really interesting, folks, because Ali has a Facebook group. What something like, what can you do with a stick?
Yeah.
I can remember contributing to it, and now I realise what she was up to.
Yeah, why? What's she doing with a stick? And I still in my resources when I'm actually introducing these. And actually, there's a course coming up next week at Community Playthings in Robertsbridge, which is called With a Mind for Maths, and we will be using them there alongside the Community Playthings kit. It doesn't matter what kit it is, you know, it's how you can use it in an open-ended way.
And there has been a big shift to more heuristic play items in early years as opposed to the plastic Fisher Price.
Yes, absolutely. But I saw an argument the other day saying I'm not going to throw my plastic out because that again is ecologically bad because it's still functioning. I will not replace it. I will replace it, and our resources are planet friendly where possible. So
I'm just saying that because I'm not. It's the open-endedness of resources that have become more important. I think over the last. I mean, I've been in early years nearly over 50 years now. Actually, I think so. Have seen things come and go, big time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But I don't think the open-ended things are going to go. Mine
no, I hope not. I hope not.
Mine goes right back. I've been trying to trace back. Why do I do this kind of stuff? I was brought up in a village post office, and in the summer holidays, I had to entertain myself. My mum was busy in the shop. If I went in the shop, I got a job, stacking shelves or selling raffle tickets or whatever. I was even in the shop window from 2 weeks old. That was my playpen. That probably tells you something. But the things I had to play with were whatever we had, but we had lots of them. Because we were a shop, we had lots of pop crates, or we had lots of boxes, or we had lots of sticks, or whatever it was. And that was a time when things were returned to recycle. So we had loads of them.
Get your money back for your bottle.
Yeah, and that's coming back in Scotland, I believe now. So, I either had one thing and I could do lots of things. And, even with one stick, if it's horizontal, you can do lots of things with it. If it's vertical, if it's diagonal, if it's on the ground, if it's in something, even just with one stick, it's endless opportunities.
What do people think that are watching? Do your children play with sticks? Everybody's gone very quiet. This often happens on Spark Debates. We end up getting carried away, talking away, and everybody obviously is interested because they're still here. But people don't comment, or they tell me afterwards, couldn't comment, didn't have time because we moved on to something else too quick.
Oh. Well, if anybody's got any questions and they want to get in touch with me directly, then my details are on the website. I'd be very happy to hear from you. Oh,
here we go.
Don't use sticks unless in our woods.
Okay.
They do, but they have to be guided. Well, there are guidelines, and the children do follow it. You have to hold it with 2 hands, and it's always below the belly button. And when my children go and get the Groovy broomsticks, they will say, Mrs. McClure, can I go and get a Groovy broomstick? Can I go and get an empty oval? Can I get a handy clock? Yes, you can. Off they go. They go and get it. And they always look over at me as they're carrying it below the belly. And again,
but that's just the same as teaching children how to carry a chair or a pair of scissors, isn't it?
It is. And it's the phrase below the belly button is just a little bit humorous, It's belly button. Then they it's below my belly button, and they know. And it was like most recently, I was using the sticks again with a group of children. I hadn't used them for a year with them, and they went over to them and they just said, "It's below the belly button, Mrs. McClure." And it's like, oh my goodness, it's stuck. The learning has stuck with you, and it does. Learning that lasts. Yeah, I'm absolutely really passionate about that.
Anybody else got a comment?
I'm afraid, Kathy, I am going to have to wrap up fairly soon, but I've
no, that's fine. I'm bringing it to a close anyway. I was just asking if anybody wanted to say anything else. Well, if we haven't got any more comments, thank you very much, Ali. Always inspiring. As I say, I will be sending the recording out to everybody. Please feel free to follow the recording though, and make comments below the videos, and we can continue the conversation afterwards.
Good phrases. Which phrases?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think we need to be more positive in life. Yeah. In early years, and raise, we want to raise our profile, but we also we all need to feel good as practitioners and being proud of something.
If you use this reflective learning tool, then you do feel good because you've reflected on your practice. Anything you've got a challenge with, you've then worked out how to find a solution for.
No, absolutely. And that's facilitating.
And you're in good company.
And enhancing.
I was invited to speak on this on the forum that belongs to Eton College. So I spoke to their international platform on this. So
we're very honoured to have you this evening. So thank you very much.